The Legion of the Damned are a mysterious band of space marines who appear unannounced when all hope seems lost, striding forth from hidden netherworlds to bring retribution to the Imperium's foes. The Legion is an army of vengeance and of flame, a brotherhood of warriors who appear at first glance to be space marines, but quickly prove to be more lethal than even those most formidable of transhuman warriors. These warriors are variously said to dwell in the space between this world and the realm of the warp, in the hopes and dreams of desperate men, and in pockets of reality eternally lit by the fires of hatred. In truth, the Astartes that make up the self-proclaimed Legion of the Damned are remnants of the lost loyalist Firehawks chapter. The Legion's Space Marines are afflicted by a strange warp contagion that destroys their sanity. As it progresses, their bodies decay physically at the cellular level, but they grow in supernatural strength and the ability to use the power of the Immaterium against the Emperor's foes. Each Astartes of the Legion is rapidly approaching the moment when he will finally succumb to the contagion. Combat can initiate the final stages of the disease, in which the afflicted Space Marines reach a peak in physical power, but also enter a permanently berserker state that ends with their death. These silent warriors are Space Marine in appearance, their black armored adorned with images of bone and fire, yet they are not of any chapter recognized in the Imperium. The true origins and nature of the Legion of the Damned is shrouded in mystery and myth. Some rumors suggest that they were the survivors of the Lost Firehawks chapter, transmuted by the warp storm that claimed their vessel. Others imply that the Legion are an extension of the Emperor's will, time-lost survivors, or even the vengeful spirits of Space Marines slain in the Imperium's many wars. In the course of their investigations, several Inquisitors have tried to capture or intercept the Legion of the Damned, but all have failed. Events always conspire to prevent the Inquisition from getting close to their quarry, leaving them nothing more than frustrated witnesses to an event. Who or what guides the Legion of the Damned is an enigma to all. They appear only in time of great need, coalescing from the fires of a desperate battlefield to turn a disaster into a victory. Little is truly known about the Legion of the Damned, though a few truths have come to light as reports of their manifestations have been collected and compared. They attack to save some part of the Imperium from disaster, a fact that implies they have powers of prediction that even the most gifted of seers and prophets cannot rival. Whenever the Legion of the Damned appears on the field of battle, they do so without warning. Bursting out of clouds of flame, they stride forth from nothing. The Legion is always clad in ceramite of deepest black, despite their surroundings, whether they appear in a brightly lit haven of a planetary governor, or under the glare of a sun at its zenith. Their armor seems to consume natural light. The pale bones and death heads emblazed on their armor are lit by a supernatural fire, their armor flickering as if each legionnaire had been set alight with some combustible chemical. There have been several accounts of legionnaires becoming little more than pillars of flame at the height of an engagement. On such occasions, the individual will fight with terrible ferociousness before succumbing to the flame and disappearing from reality. There have been many accounts of legionnaires of the damned enduring firepower that would annihilate mortal men. Among them is the report from a Achaean battle zone, where a handful of Astartes of the Legion of the Damned were witnessed walking unharmed from the volcano cannon blast that claimed 4 predators and several squads of space marines. The bolters carried by the legionnaires discharge flaming projectiles that can pierce the strongest armor. Imperial scholars have concluded that the legionnaires are able to fire far more bolts from their weapon than the ammunition capacity of their clips would suggest. Indeed, no footage has ever been recorded of any kind of weapon reload, even in the most protracted of engagements. They move with such speed in close combat that it leaves other space marines in disarray. The Legion fights in complete silence. The battlefield is struck with an eerie silence at the presence of these space marines. Once the tide of battle has been turned, and those in need of rescue have been freed from the threat that had closed around them, the legionnaires vanish from sight. Some witnesses say they look away for a second, only to look back and find nothing there. Those monitoring devices that are able to capture evidence of the Legion's manifestation have machine spirits that are badly traumatized, and have to be coaxed back into life by a talented tech marine before they will yield any secrets at all. If an investigator wishes to obtain any kind of first-hand accounts, he must visit those who witnessed the incident within solar days, for the presence of these strange space marines erases itself from the mind, much as a dream or a nightmare. There are those in the complex strata of the Imperium that make it their business to study the Legion of the Damned. They hope to learn not only of the mystery that lies behind them, but to capture whatever peculiar abilities they wield and use them for the betterment of the Imperium. Evidence collected has given credit to the idea that the Legion has a strong mastery of the warp. Data collected from servo skulls captured the presence of an individual on a battlefield surrounded by a warp storm, only for another skull capturing the same individual across the other side of the galaxy shortly afterwards. In one similar case, the same individual was captured simultaneously, and he too was on two opposite sides of the galaxy. If this power could be harnessed properly, it would make for a grand prize that could change the fate of mankind on a galactic level, allowing the armies of the Imperium to multiply their military by any unimaginable factor. The Ordo Cronus, the part of the Inquisition that deals with temporal anomalies, is given the task to search for the Legion's secrets. There are members of that selective brotherhood who have spent their entire adult lives in pursuit of the first-hand sightings. Every time the operatives of the Ordo Cronus get close to their quarries, events conspire to keep them apart. Landslides, telekinetic bursts, sudden mass aneurysms, or even vehicular explosions force the curious and the mysterious apart, until the Legion has vanished once more. A few scholars of the Adeptus Astartes have suggested that the Legion of the Damned is a psychic backlash. Events such as the Isvan massacre or the death of a Primarch were so traumatic they left a permanent scar on the psyche of all the first founding Space Marine legions. A scar so deep it has permeated not only the chapter that came after them, but hundreds of successor chapters since. There are radicals amongst the Librarius who have a similar theory, though they believe the Legion of the Damned is a kind of consensual hallucination, and occasionally even manifestation, conjured by mankind as a whole. They believe that the subconscious power of hope is so strong that when combined with the nuisance psychic abilities that lurk within humanity's minds and a stimulus of immediate death, it can potentially be made reality. Central to this theory is the idea that though a single man may have but the tiniest shred of spiritual or mystical ability, the uncounted trillions of humans that populate the Imperium all contribute to a kind of psychic reservoir that can be tapped into. This theory is reinforced by observing that the aspects of fire and death that are associated with the Adeptus Astartes are made manifest upon the armor of those conjured warriors. If the theory is correct, their weapons are no more real than the belief in salvation. A darker premise held by the renegade Inquisitor Kisos before he was slain by Gregor Einsenhorn is that just as the dark gods of chaos have demonic servants made of the same soul stuff that sustains them, the theory goes that the Legion of the Damned were shards of the Emperor's will given form. The Inquisitor's writings share the idea that these dead angels could take a number of forms, just as the demons of the chaos powers range from diminutive to colossal, and that their greater forms have yet to be recorded. The renegade Inquisitor maintained there is plenty of evidence that almost every Legion appearance has happened in an area where the metaphysical barrier between real space and the warp is thin, suggesting a kernel of truth behind this claim that the Legion are creatures of the immaterial. The Legion of the Damned chapter badge is a large white skull on a field of black. Another belief whispered among the hidden order of the Adeptus Astartes is that the Legion of the Damned was once a chapter of Space Marines, a force that has been claimed by the fires of the warp and reborn into a more sinister form. Throughout the Imperium's long history, several contingents of Space Marines have made the voyage into the Immaterium and emerged changed as a result, or not emerged at all. Prominent amongst these are the Firehawks, a chapter whose history was blighted by disaster. In the year 963 of the 41st millennium, the Firehawks were sent to the Crow's World subsector to engage a flotilla of Eldar raiders and bring the anarchy that was spreading there to an abrupt end. The scale of the Xenos' incursion was such that the entire fleet, including the chapter's mobile fortress monastery, the Rapturous Rex, made a successful war jump from the Pieris system 120 light-years from their target coordinates. 5 starships, over 800 battle brethren, and 2,000 other personnel expected to reach their target within no more than half a solar day, though they never translated back into real space. 20 standard years after the event, the chapter was officially declared lost. The great bell of lost souls tolled 1,000 times, and a black candle was lit in the Adeptus Chapel of the Fallen Heroes within the Imperial Palace upon Terra itself. In the 986th year of the 41st millennium, a routinely Imperial Navy patrol passed through the Orc-held system of Jakor Tal. The squadron discovered altogether unexpected scenes of devastation. The limited facilities available to the patrol could uncover no clues to the identity of the attacking forces. The incident was noted and passed into the record of the Adeptus Administratum. A rash of similar instances within the same and adjoining sectors arose the interest of the Inquisition, but no sign of the intruders was ever discovered. A patrol ship in the Moran subsector narrowly avoided a collision with a spacecraft at the Kift system jump point. The patrol ship was entering the Kift system as the unidentified craft was leaving. Alerted by the close encounter, the patrol crew scanned the entire jump area and discovered 2 cylindrical objects within the intruder's projected flight path. These were hauled aboard and proved to be standard coffins used for Imperial starship burials in space. Though they lacked any identification markings, the coffins were shipped back to Terra and opened by the Adeptus Mechanicus. The coffins themselves were identified as belonging to the Absolute, one of the spacecrafts from the vanished Firehawks chapter fleet. Inside were the armored remains of 2 Space Marines. The armored suits seemed to belong to members of the lost chapter and were carefully broken open. The bodies within were human, but further identification proved impossible due to their advanced state of decay. The unconventional armor colors and unofficial insignia puzzled the investigators, but serial numbers on the armor tallied with the equipment made by or issued to the Firehawks by the Mechanicus. Almost a standard year later, a besieged Imperial research station received unexpected help. The garrison had been attacked by Orc freebooters. After 3 hours of fighting, the situation looked hopeless by the station's defenders. Without warning, the Orcs found themselves attacked from the rear. Within half an hour, several hundred Orcs had fallen to the mysterious, power-armored figures. As suddenly as they had appeared, the unknown warriors vanished. This time they left behind a banner, the chapter banner of the Firehawks, and inscribed upon it was the High Gothic motto, In Decapito Imperitoma Ultra Articulo Mortis, for the Emperor beyond the point of death. Along with the banner, there was a digital flight recorder and other sealed items. These were shipped back to Terra. A few reports of those who have seen the Legion of the Damned unhelmed speak of ghostly voices, sunken skin, and hollow-eyed sockets. Every supernatural occurrence, even glitches in reality that attributes to these mysterious warriors, adds credence to this theory. The original Firehawks numbered 200 surviving battle brothers. All of the chapter's gene seed had been lost, all of its initiates killed, and most of the chapter's officers were gone. None of the chapter's serfs had survived at all. To make matters worse, the Brethren had been mutated by their intense, unshielded exposure to the warp. This change became more obvious over the next few solar months. The surviving Firehawks' skin began to blacken and blister, and their flesh began to fester and putrefy. Slowly they began to die. Within solar days of the transition into normal space, it became obvious that the chapter had been exposed to some form of dangerous warp mutation or disease. It took many years to navigate a way back within the borders of the Imperium, during which time almost half the surviving brethren succumbed to the disease. Those who remained were no longer sane. Pain and despair had driven even their hardened minds beyond the point of rationality. Doomed to agonizing death, they gradually became obsessed with their fate. Now they only wanted to die, but they were still Space Marines, still loyal to the Emperor and mankind. They were determined that they would die only for a purpose. So began the unending war of the Legion of the Damned. The surviving Firehawks elected to remove all official insignia from their armor. Instead, their armor was painted black, decorated by each battle brother with whatever emblem of death he chose. Most of the legions employed a similar theme: skeletons, bones, and skulls. All ranks and company structure were abolished, since most of the chapter's officers were already dead and the remaining warriors were too few to make up a fully functioning chapter hierarchy. All of the legion's battle brothers were to be equal before death, leveled in station by the certainty of their collective assurance of extinction. Using the Emperor's guidance to go where they were needed most, the warriors decided to use up their lives attacking the Imperium's enemies wherever they could be found, the disease that had robbed them of their sanity and their health, but never their loyalty. An exhaustive report commissioned by the High Lords of Terra themselves painted a compelling picture of what might have become of the Legion for those who still seek the truth. Its conclusion states that the legions are still active, but that they are deliberately quarantining themselves from the rest of the Imperial servants. Quadrimestus believes that the Legion is a lost strike force of Space Marine who have somehow blended with the stuff of the warp, contracting a kind of metaphysical contagion. They fear their disease could spread to innocent souls should they remain in proximity for too long, and will do anything to prevent this. Knowing that their affliction will claim their body and soul, the Legionnaires seek to punish the enemies of mankind as best that they can. Though the warp contagion is said to bestow all manners of strange supernatural abilities upon those that bear its curse, it is ultimately fatal. Worse still, being spiritual in nature, the contagion's effect do not end with death. A being that dies with such taint in his soul is damned indeed. For though they are claimed by the fickle tides of the warp, they can be reborn after a certain period of time, much as a banished demon can return to the service of its masters after its purgatory is complete. The unusual but startling incidences of legionnaires entering a flame berserker state are perhaps best explained by the warp contagion theory. Quadrimesta calls this state pyromortis. He believes a legionnaire enters a pyromortis state as the curse enters its final stages, burning his essence in one grand inferno before the damned individual is snuffed out altogether. This is called the martyrdom theory, for only those with true steel in their souls would risk such a horrendous fate in order to save the lives of faithful men and women of the Imperium. The warp contagion concept would also explain the phenomenon whereby the Legion's intervention often proves critical to the fate of the wider Imperium. In his later works, Quadrimesta concludes that the warp contagion bestows a great deal of psychic ability on the sufferer, blending their bodies and minds alike with the raw stuff of chaos. The Legion is able to read the Emperor's guidance with an uncanny degree of accuracy, tapping into the immense psychic presence of the Master of Mankind and using his abilities to read the future in the swirling tides of the warp. By striking hard at the most pivotal point of fate, the Legion can inflict the maximum damage on those Xenos races and heretic factions that would harm the Imperium. In this way, the Legionnaires are locked into a cycle of perpetual martyrdom, fighting an endless war against the enemies of mankind, all the while being unable to clear their own name from suspicion. Anonymous and unyielding, the Legion continues to fight, with none truly sure whether they are angels or devils, perhaps not even the legionnaires themselves. Despite the speculation that has accumulated around the Legion of the Damned, the only point of certainty remains their uncanny skill on the field of battle.
Oh, I used to put my